First, this is Dr. Daria Brzezinski, and this morning we have as our guest Dave Lehman, principal of the Alternative Community School in Ithaca, New York. You've heard me talk about Dave several times. He has this incredible school, which is now called an essential school, part of Ted Sizer's movement of essential schools, but I know Dave is going to tell you he's been around long before Ted Sizer's work. Good morning, Dave.
Morning. How are you?
I'm terrific. Dave, can you give us a little bit of background of the Alternative Community School in Ithaca, New York, and how it started, and some demographics? Some people may not know about Ithaca, New York. Give us a little bit of background, please.
Sure. Let me just give you an overview. Ithaca is a upstate community in the heart of the Finger Lakes. We're about 55,000 people. Of course, the home of Cornell University and also Ithaca College. But it's in Tompkins County, which is also the northernmost county in Appalachia. So we have our own. Actually, agriculture is the second source of income in the county, and although education is the number one source, and tourism is right in there also. Lovely part of the Finger Lakes. And we have a 155 square mile school district, so you can see that it spreads out into the rural areas as well as our city of Ithaca. And we draw on a population of students that is the most diverse outside the 5 large cities of the state of New York. We have a population of African American, Hispanic, and increasing numbers of refugees from various countries, East Asia, as well as Central and South America. So it's a diverse population, about 6,000 plus students in the district. There are 8 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, 1 central high school, and then our school is a middle school and high school, grades 6 through 12. We have 260 students that we draw from a lottery of our applicant pool, actually sub-pools of that waiting list group to match the diversity of the school district. So we have our percentage of all of those different populations, including an ESL, English as a Second Language program. We have a significant number of students with special education needs, and the whole diversity that would be representative of our community. The waiting list often will have 100 and 200 people at any given time. So,
you mean the waiting list to get into your school?
Yes, and that's again why we draw from the lottery these sub-pools of our waiting list to take students each year. So maybe that's a bit of an overview.
David, can you give us, I think part of what we need to hear is the establishment of this school. I mean, when we hear about successful schools, we hear about them at the height of their success, but we really don't hear about the foundation and how the school started. Can you give us a little bit of an idea? Was your school an at-risk school? Was it a regular public school? How did it begin?
Surely. We're in our 26th year. We were begun in 1974, but about a year and a half before that, in 1973, the then superintendent of schools created a large blue ribbon committee, some 30-plus people, including teachers, students, social workers, psychologists, community people, school people, to look into the possible need for alternative education at the secondary level in Ithaca. They were charged with looking at what might be some of the needs for such. And as a result of an extensive study and visiting other schools across the country and looking into what was called alternative education in the early 70s, particularly in public schools, this committee came out with a set of 12 recommendations for things that were needed to improve the overall secondary schools in Ithaca, and one of which was to begin what was called new junior high program, which would be an alternative junior high school, grades 7, 8, and 9 at that time, to be given a 3-year trial period, and if successful, then to have the opportunity to expand to include a high school. So in fact, I came from Ohio to be the initial teacher administrator for this new junior high program, which we did meet our successful criteria for the first 3 years, and were able to subsequently expand to the high school. And then our school district went to a middle school model, which brought the sixth graders into the secondary schools as well.
Now, David, did you originally have any conception on how you wanted to create this school?
Well, two things.
Was there a model that you used?
Two crucial things were here. One, there had, as a result of this alternative education committee, there had been an advisory board established which put together a document which outlined the overall goals and some of the initial structure that the school board and administration wanted to see in this new junior high program. So there was a skeleton, an outline, again based on research and visiting some of the other alternative schools around the country and looking into what might seem appropriate for Ithaca. I came from having worked with alternative schools, both public and non-public, in Ohio and in Texas, and my particular view was heavily influenced by a democratic, shared decision-making, collegial approach to the running of the school, with an opportunity for looking at diverse ways by which students might engage in a variety of learning opportunities, including things within the community. So we worked with that general model to begin the year, and subsequently, as we gained experience, continued to modify and adapt, add new things as we learned from our experience and as we learned from visiting other schools ourselves and being in contact with people in alternative schools across the country through various conferences and workshops.
Well, I'd like to get into something you just mentioned. You said that your focus was democratic schools. What did you mean by the democratic process? Because I know I've been to Ithaca, and your system of democracy is far unique from anything I've ever seen. How would you explain it to our audience who's never been to your school?
Well, there are several levels at which it operates. We might start with what I mentioned here just a moment ago, the advisory board. That's continued to be a central feature of the school and its overall policy making. It's now just simply referred to as the Acs Council, or the ACS Site-Based Council, ACS meaning, of course, Alternative Community School. And this council is made up of students, staff, parent, community, and school board representative. And we meet monthly and determine broad policy for the school under the overall umbrella of the Ithaca City School District Board of Education. We do the interviewing and recommendation for positions for people to be hired. We oversee a number of components of specific budget items. So there is this combined group of all the major, I think the current lingo would be stakeholders within the school community, who meet to make decisions at that level. Then there's the weekly staff meeting, which is on Wednesday afternoons from 2:45 to 4:45, where we meet for a couple of hours every week. And that staff meeting is again run by a committee of staff in a collegial fashion with me. It's not my staff meeting, which is all too typical in many of our schools, and particular high schools across the country, that the principal runs the staff meetings. They're usually by contract with the teachers union. Our staff works as a committee with me, and we plan the staff meeting much of the time. At least every other staff meeting, we spend the bulk of the time in a series of mini workshops in what we call teaching and learning groups, ones that staff have decided they need and want to work on, whether it's improving their teaching of heterogeneous classes, which all of our classes are, or whether it's working on how to incorporate computers more appropriately and usefully into some of the instruction. So there's that level of our democratic shared decision-making as a staff. So it's a flat organization, a horizontal organization as far as my administration with the staff here.
As opposed to the normal, traditional pyramidal structure is what you're saying.
Yeah, where you would have a hierarchy of administrator and then department heads or subdivisions within that. This is a flat organization. So then beyond the work with the staff, there is the way in which we involve students in more active sharing in the decision making, so that there are about 15 plus standing or ad hoc committees of students who are helping us run the school, doing everything from a student court, the Alternative Community Court, which serves as a disciplinary body for certain aspects of student behavior, to a group which helps with the maintenance of the building, doing the recycling and helping with some of the building maintenance, and a number of committees throughout the whole school that students are involved with. And these committees actually meet for a full period twice a week on Wednesdays and Thursdays. And then also on Wednesdays, one of the committees, the Agenda Committee, is the group of students who helps organize, implement, and run the all-school town meetings that we have every Wednesday. Although sometimes they are in subgroups, they might be quarter school meetings for smaller groups for more discussion. But often it's the whole school community, staff and students alike, run by a couple of students. The meeting run by a couple of students, where there may be proposals before the student body, or there are special presentations that are being made, a variety of things which occur there in those all-school meetings.
By the way, that is probably the most impressive part of your agenda throughout the day, observing students. I mean, the students run the meeting as well as take a major part in and participation. The entire school body participates. It's just I've watched them over the years create policies for the school, delete policies that weren't effective anymore, share information, have conversations with teachers. It is just an extraordinary system that you've developed, where students directly participate in the decision-making process of the school.
Well, thank you. You probably would have loved to have seen one that occurred just before the winter break. We've had a group of sixth graders first semester working on a plan to design what we call SPACE, S-P-A-C-E, a space for performing arts and community events. And they have worked with a local architect. We had a Empire State grant, and these youngsters, sixth graders, presented twice to the whole school meeting. Most recently, then in December, they presented their plan using a PowerPoint presentation with a computer and a projector. And
sixth graders.
It was just wonderful. A group of sixth graders standing forward and showing their plans, and for what is really going to be, it's essentially like an amphitheater on the north end of the property that we hope to have I guess you call it an old-time barn raising come the fall. It'll be an amphitheater raising, as it were. But these young kids were great in their presentation at that meeting.
Part of the let me take a little break here. This is Children Come First with Dr. Daria Brzezinski. We're here every Tuesday from 10 to 11 a.m., WAAT 750 a.m. on your radio dial. We're here today with Dave Lehman, principal of the Alternative Community School in Ithaca, New York, an essential school. Dave, there's so many things I want to talk about, and I don't even know where to start. Your school has so much active participation by your students. The classroom structure is different, is unique. The kinds of courses that the students take are unique, and yet you are a public school. The same regulations, teachers' unions, and everything else like everyone else has. Can you take us through a little bit of for example, I was in one of your science classrooms, and the students basically spent more time talking than the teacher did.
Right. A lot of our approach is to try to engage students more meaningfully in instruction. We try to keep our average class size around 16, 17. These are all heterogeneous classes, mixed ability. We don't have tracking, as you would see in conventional high schools. A major part of our high school program is also our graduation by exhibition. We don't use Carnegie units of credit that are the convention in many high schools still today. or in New York State here, where we have Regents exams for the final exams and courses. We don't use letter grades, and therefore our students in applying to colleges and universities don't have the conventional grade point average or class rank. But the graduation by exhibition instead is an opportunity for students to actually demonstrate what they know and have learned in a variety of ways. We accumulate portfolios of work. Students do actual demonstrations, presentations before a television audience or before a public audience, before a group of teachers, sometimes with outside experts who come in and review this work as they do their presentations, so that over the course of a year and then their high school career, students are presenting actual evidence. They can demonstrate and show what they have learned and are able to do, and this is what we call our performance-based assessment for our graduation by exhibition, rather than using these conventional standardized tests. And then the classroom instructional activity is designed to scaffold up, to build up the skills over the years for students to be able to successfully demonstrate these different proficiencies that they're working on.
Now, how does this equate to students who want to go to college? You've been graduating students now for 20-some years. How do they get into, or do they get into college? What is your percentage of students going into college?
We've had some, I think 18 now, graduating classes. As I mentioned, we began as a junior high school. And year in, year out, anywhere from typically, 75, 85% of our students are going immediately into college or university after graduation. Some will work for a year or two, or travel, or do voluntary experience. We have one of last year's graduates who's teaching English out on a Hopi reservation in Arizona, another who's helping build schools in East Africa, and these people will do some different things for a year or two before they then come back to start college. And our students are getting in colleges and universities across New York State, our SUNY system, or the State University of New York system, large schools, small schools, across the nation, Ivy League schools, University of Chicago out to the California schools, or you name it, across the country, our students are able to get into these college universities. And what we send basically is a kind of a mini portfolio, a collection of evaluations of their work. They put together a resume. We have letters of recommendation from myself, the guidance counselor. We have a summary of the work that they've done in their essential areas for their graduation by exhibition, and it's quite an impressive little portfolio that we put together for them. And again, without letter grades, grade point average, class rank, they are getting into these colleges and universities across the country.
So your school then demystifies the fact that SAT scores and grade point averages and ranks really have nothing to do with entrance into college nor college success. Is that correct?
Well, decreasing numbers of colleges are actually even requiring SATs, recognizing that they're not necessarily the greatest predictor for success in college. We certainly don't discourage or tell our students not to take them if they would like to, and many do. Again, we don't have a college track of students. It's everybody who's graduating, and if they want to, they can take them. And they tend to do about as well as anybody in any other conventional school, even though we don't really stress or prepare them for in any really elaborate way. But again, most colleges are looking to other things. For example, our students are required to do a minimum of 60 hours of community service in part of their graduation by exhibition, and many do well over 100. And there's even now beginning to appear on college applications a place to indicate, have you done community service? So it's often those kind of experiences, as well as what students can write and demonstrate that they have done in participating in our community studies programs, in our democratic school governance that we were talking about earlier, as well as the ways they can show their learning through different things they've done with portfolios or presentations that they've made throughout high school. So it serves them well.
Does the 100 hours, is that per year?
No, it's that's throughout their high school experience. Accumulated amount of at least 60, and many do 100. Incidentally, speaking back earlier of the all-school town meetings, that was a graduation requirement that was proposed and initially voted in by the students many years ago, and at that point it was actually only 30 hours, but just about 2 or 3 years ago, students brought a proposal. They thought it ought to be at least twice that, and student body, more than 2 to 1, voted in support of doubling that minimum to at least 60 hours. So again, there's a example of students taking responsibility and recognizing some value in what they wanted to see as part of their own education.
David, I know you travel as well. The students travel. Can you tell us a little bit about traveling, how it's now? Remember, ladies and gentlemen, this is a public school we're talking about. Can you tell us a little bit about how the traveling takes place, where you go, how you pay for it, and why you do it?
Absolutely. Every year we essentially close school here in the building for a week. It's called Spring Trips Week, usually the last week in May around Memorial Day weekend. And the idea is that we want to extend the four walls of the school and extend the environment in which students are learning. We do that here within Ithaca with students doing a variety of community studies and different programs and where they're out into the community. But we want to go even beyond that. The opportunity to get out and participate in the natural environment is one major part for many of the trips. It's going to a different place. We're continually surprised by how many of our students have actually not been outside of Ithaca or not been to other areas. It's an opportunity for youngsters to work together to plan something, to collaborate in how they're going to actually raise the money, organize the trip, the transportation, where they're going to stay. Typically it involves the least expensive, which is often tent camping, and there will be some of the spring trips for this year. There'll be a canoe group, a kayaking and mountain biking group. They're going to do a little combination of some sort of high adventure things. There's a group that will be doing backpacking and hiking, and then there's a group that will be going to Mexico. Another group that is the Marine Ecology Virgin Islands trip. Now that's an interesting one as you ask about how do people raise the money for these. That group, the Marine Ecology Virgin Islands trip, those students run our Cafe ACS, which is our breakfast and lunch program. They help prepare the food with our cook, serve it, clean up the whole operation of our breakfast and lunch program, and are essentially earning their way throughout the year for their spring trip. So that's one way in which funds are raised. Where there also are some all-school fundraising events. We could sell you a bag of pecans if we still had some. We have a pecan sale in the fall. All school community gets involved in that. We have a major spaghetti dinner with a sort of a Christmas or holiday crafts fair that also includes some one-act plays. This is kind of a extravaganza that we put on in late fall, early winter that is a major school fundraising event. So there are several of those all-school fundraisers which contribute monies to each spring trip, and then depending upon the trip, they may do some individual fundraising, anything from holding a community-wide Mother's Day brunch to a chicken barbecue that's held down at the local Agway where they sell chicken barbecue, to groups that do things like raising money through collecting recycled bottles, deposit bottles, or holding bake sales, the kind of conventional things that folks do to raise money to go on these spring trips.
And every single student in your school goes on the spring trip? With
the small exception of a few who may have jobs or have other commitments that make it difficult for them to leave for a week. There are always a few exceptions, but essentially everybody goes.
That's phenomenal. And
again, a learning experience extending beyond the conventional classroom. We think there's so many opportunities, and often kids write about these in their journals when they return, and what powerful learning experiences these are. A group that does Habitat for Humanity for a week and helps build low-income housing. A group that will go up to the Akwesasne Mohawk Reservation and help with the Freedom School, the Mohawk Immersion School there on the reservation. And these kinds of things often become really life-transforming experiences for kids as they experience and see another part of the world and how other people live and what other people need.
Well, one of the major factors I notice in your school is that you are not top-heavy with administrators and staff and things of that nature. You seem to have students who do virtually the office work, the cafeteria work, the maintenance work. So your students participate wholeheartedly in every aspect, not just the instructional aspect, but every aspect of your school. Is that correct?
Exactly, and we think that also helps in the overall learning process. And it goes back to a very simple principle, principle of participation, that the more you participate in the actual affairs of what you're involved in this case a school, the more likely you are to really be committed to it, to be invested in it, to be engaged in it. So, and this extends right on down into the classroom, so that as we design and work out our particular classes or courses or extended projects, students are often engaging with us in the at least the fine-tuning, if not some major design work in the given course, where we as teachers come in with a particular outline of the things that the skills and the topics and the things which were included in our course booklet. That is why they may have chosen the course, but then we'll do some shaping of that and working on it with them as we go through the process.
Your operating budget, is it any different than any other school district?
As a member of the Coalition of Essential Schools, one of our 10 common principles is that we should be able to do this kind of work for no more than 10% greater budget than a conventional school, and we are within that 10% guideline. Matter of fact, we're considerably below that, closer to about 5%. And some of that money also I have, or others, we have brought in different grants to help. We have 1.5 staff positions now that's paid through a particular grant that we have, so that we constantly are looking for ways to do that. But we try to put the dollars as much as we can into the classroom, again, to keep those class sizes small. We have all of our staff serve as what we call family group leaders, teacher advisors working with small group of students, and we don't have staff doing hall duty or lunchroom duty or playground duty, things of that sort. Again, we're sharing in that responsibility with students, and we try to extend that staffing and the budget to put it as much as we can into the classroom and into the work directly with students.
You're listening to Children Come First. This is Dr. Daria Brzezinski. We're here today and every Tuesday from 10 to 11 a.m., WAAT 750 a.m. on your radio dial. We're here today with Dave Lehman, the principal of the Alternative Community School in Ithaca, New York. If you'd like to have information about our broadcast, you can call us at 877-PRO-KIDS toll-free. That's 877-PRO-KIDS, PROKIDS. Or you can reach us email, PROKIDS, PROKIDS, at rlc.net. That's PROKIDS at rlc.net. And Dave, I hope you don't mind, but I'll give them your phone number at the school if they'd like any information about your school, the Alternative Community School. The number is 607-274-2183. That's 607-274-2183. And for a few moments, we're going to stop and listen to our sponsors. We'll be back on our second half hour with Dave Lehman, the principal of the Alternative Community School in Ithaca, New York. Please join us to learn more about this successful school in our next half hour. Thank you. We're back with Dave Lehman, principal of the Alternative Community School in Ithaca, New York. And Dave, we've said a number of times that you are part of the Essential Schools. What are the Essential Schools?
Right. The Coalition of Essential Schools was begun by Ted Sizer at Brown University when he was head of the Department of Education there. And this came about after a 5-year study of the essentially the U.S. high school. This is from 1979 to 84, in which Sizer visited schools, high schools throughout the country, large and small, public, private, parochial, trying to get a sense of what was going on with the high school across this country and what needed to be done to improve it. And as a result of that, he's written 3 different books. The first one called Horace's Compromise, The Dilemma of the American High School. Horace being a sort of prototypical middle-aged English teacher who, and so that initial book is written essentially from a staff member's perspective, and the compromises that he has to go through constantly as a member of a conventional high school faculty. As a result of that study, then, which was actually sponsored by the National Association of Secondary School Principals and the National Association of Private Secondary High Schools, as a result of that, Sizer then felt that we needed to get to the essential components of what really ought to be happening in high school, and he had a number of key imperatives which he saw, basically things like that we ought to be engaging young people in using their minds more, using their minds well, that ought to be a central feature, and he saw so little of that. So he outlined what he saw as initially 9 common principles that could be the driving force behind a set of schools that would want to essentially radically reform high school. And invited people to join him in that effort. And a number of people schools began to take on the challenge. We joined some 3 years later in 1987 and have been a member ever since. Ted has visited the school, spent a day with us here, and we've had a number of others. We visited schools and been part of their annual fall forum. And we, along with some others, but particularly we're pushing for a 10th common principle, along with these original 9 principles that we mentioned, which would be to build on the thing we talked about earlier of the democratic school governance and our work with a diverse population. And here about 4 years ago, the coalition did add a 10th common principle to address issues of democratic governance and equity across a diverse population. So we've been an active member ever since, and it's been one of the things which helped move us in the direction of graduation by exhibition. That's one of the expectations, one of the 9 common principles of the coalition.
Dave, could you just review the 10 principles briefly again?
Well, it includes things such as the graduation by exhibition, personalized, more individual attention to students. It includes, as we mentioned earlier, doing this with no more than a 10% increase in budget. It encourages a kind of approach to those who need remediation to scaffold up youngsters' skills early on in their high school experience so they can participate fully across the curriculum. It encourages and supports interdisciplinary work, integrating curriculum. It encourages people to look beyond the conventional 5x5 schedule format and to look for longer time periods for more in-depth kind of work. It encourages, in these principles, students to engage in more in-depth analysis of their topics, the subject matter that they're looking at, as opposed to the all too typical sort of rush to coverage in an introductory course that's often very thin and a mile long. So those are just, in a quick shorthand, some of the kinds of features that are incorporated within the 10 common principles, as well as the new one I mentioned, which addresses the issue of democratic school governance and responding more equitably to a diverse population.
I'm going to go back to something you stated earlier because I think it's something that's really critical as far as the operation of your school and the way school districts and schools are run generally, traditionally across the United States, and that is the flat organizational structure versus the pyramidal structure. It seems to me that you have there's so much respect and working together. The atmosphere is so different in your school than it is generally in traditional schools. It's almost as if there's an equality that is just when you walk through the school building, not just between students and teachers, but everyone, all of the staff, from the maintenance, whatever you call your janitorial staff, to the psychologists. There seems to be that the way you have approached the administration of your school seems to convey to everyone who comes in your building that everyone is equal.
I think that's probably one of the central features that we've tried to develop here is the heart of the matter is that of respect, and that everyone has something to contribute. Every human being in this school community has worth and value, and we bring different experiences, different backgrounds, both students and staff, and we can learn so much more when we share all that and we bring all of that to the table. And that's the way we've tried to approach the whole administration of the school, so that there's an opportunity to respect everyone, and for all of the students to come to respect hopefully each other and to grow into that. And then as we operate in the classroom throughout the building, working with others to do that. And we haven't mentioned parents and caregivers that are involved, and we should probably say a word about that we also certainly welcome and include them in our school governance operation. There are 2 or 3 different committees that operate at present. They're a major voice at the Acs Council meeting we mentioned in the beginning, and they often help with our spring trips. They're parents who come in and help volunteer on special project days, may do a project with our students, some who may help tutor. But as you might expect at the high school and level, often parents, particularly the youngsters urging, are kind of stepping back a little more and letting the students take more of the lead in their own education. But certainly still the opportunity for us to be involved with parents, and one of the key things is simply in communication. We send out a monthly newsletter, we send out frequent reports, written reports, and in January, at our semester break, our mid-year break, we take 3 days where we have no school. That's typically used for Regents exams in the state. We don't give the exams. Instead, we use those 3 days to have conferences with every parent or caregiver. Each of our family group leaders meets with the student and the family, and has about an hour-long conference to review what's happened the first semester and to take a look at a schedule and plans for what we'll be doing the second semester. So that kind of administrative organization and involvement of everyone extends to the parent caregivers as well.
Well, where I was going with the flat organizational structure is the fact that I noticed your students, I mean, you have a very diversified population, at risk, handicapped. They're all mixed in with everyone else. And I noticed that there is no distinction. You cannot tell one person from another. Also, I noticed that I didn't see a lot of purple hair and nose rings and,
Well, there's some of that.
Well, I mean, you don't have the extreme at your school like most schools do.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's some of that that's part of the youth culture, and we accept that as well and try to work with whatever kids bring. But perhaps there's, I think, one thing that might speak to is we're committed to the notion of small schools, that even these large urban or suburban high schools of 2,000-3,000, we're beginning to see more now that are subdividing into smaller schools within schools or houses within a larger school. Cambridge Ringen Latin High School, just their school committee, just like the school board there in Cambridge, Massachusetts, just voted to create essentially 5 houses of about 350 students each in their large high school. The idea to, again, break down that large structure into a series of smaller structures where, as we do in our small school, where people really do have a chance to know each other, where students don't fall through the cracks, where they are known by their name. They're not just a number. and that conveys a lot. And you also don't tend to then have as much pressure on what I would call the cliques that tend to occur often in many of our high schools and middle schools, which is a way that young people fight that large anonymity by creating their own little subcultures. You don't tend to find that as much in small schools, and as you're noting in our school, because we're all here trying to build a central point, which is right in the very middle of the name of the school, which is building a sense of community.
Do you have, what is your, in comparison to traditional schools or even the rest of the public schools in Ithaca, what is your violence, teen pregnancy, drugs? I mean, are they equal to, less than? Is there a significant difference?
Considerably less than. Where the numbers are very small. Doesn't mean that they aren't sometimes there, but considerably smaller by comparison with any of the other secondary schools here. We rarely suspend students, so we have a number of different strategies for dealing with a variety of things that may occur behavior-wise, including a student peer mediation committee where students are learning how to do peer mediation, which often is helpful with some of our younger students, with our middle schoolers. So no, our numbers in those areas are considerably smaller.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the coursework, the kinds of classes that students are obligated or can take. Is there some mix? Do they have to take English, mathematics, social studies, science, or is there, can they combine? What kinds of things do you offer to students?
Well, within the essentials that we outline for our graduation by exhibition, students are expected to be able to demonstrate proficiency in writing and reading and mathematics and the conventional things that we would expect a high school graduate to be able to demonstrate. So there are courses that will help them develop those skills, but there are always choices within them. There are about 4 different major category of choices. There will be courses, and in any given area there are usually at least 2 or 3 choices, and some of those might be the choice between a single period, a single discipline course versus what we call our double period, or for some people these are like block scheduling courses, longer time periods that are interdisciplinary. An example being we have a course called People's Voice, which combines the U.S. history and government with U.S. literature, a nice mix there. There's a more advanced math and science course called Algebra Physics Trig, APT for short, and that combines the mathematics and the science as well as work with computers and doing that. So there are different courses that will be offered, some single period, some double period interdisciplinary. Then there are extended projects which happen on Tuesday afternoon and Thursday morning, which are longer blocks of time and that kind of break up the regular school week and are another approach to certain aspects of the curriculum where students might be doing any of a variety of things and meeting some of those graduation requirements. And then there's our community studies program, as I mentioned, where we have a variety of community studies activities going on, even beginning with middle schoolers, where they might go out one afternoon a week, for example, Tuesday afternoon, and be at a local veterinarian office or a food store, a retail sales store, trying to experience what it's like to be out there in the world of work and kind of sampling different career possibilities, a radio station, a TV station, what have you, to more extensive internships that develop as students move into the high school and put in more time and are learning more extensively through their community studies. And then there are students who will be doing independent studies, working with a teacher, meeting once or twice a week on a design that they have worked out for some more in-depth work that they're doing in a particular area of interest. And then lastly, some of our students are accessing other learning opportunities within the community, and we encourage and welcome that, whether it's particularly with some of our juniors and seniors taking a course at our local community college, Tompkins Cortland Community College, or perhaps taking a course at Ithaca College or Cornell, so that there are a variety of options by which students can work on their academic program, meeting these different requirements through courses and a number of other ways.
You are listening to Children Come First. This is Dr. Darya Brzezinski. We're here with Dave Lehman from the Alternative Community School in Ithaca, New York. We're here every Tuesday from 10 to 11 a.m., WAAT 750 a.m. on your radio dial. And if you'd like any information, our toll-free number is 877-PRO-KIDS. That's 877-PRO-KIDS, or you can reach us by email at prokids@rlc.net. That's prokids@rlc.net. If you'd like to reach Dave Lehman at the Alternative Community School in Ithaca, New York, his number is 607-274-2183. That's 607-274-2183. Dave, you've learned in the process of our conversation here, you talked about, it seems to me, listening to you, that you use time, the time allotted throughout the school day, in a variety of different ways, from travel to block scheduling to changes from one day to the next. How do you keep track? Most people would think this chaotic. How do you keep track of all of the things that go on within the school day? Is there some sort of order?
There is a master schedule for middle school and high school students, and once one sees the overall scheme, it's not that difficult. Even our new young sixth graders, 11-year-olds, can figure it out. Perhaps the new staff take a little longer, but the kids pretty quickly figure it out. And the idea is that varying the times to more appropriately match what you want to do in your teaching is something that we need to have, that kind of flexibility. That, for example, with some of our science work, it's really helpful to have some larger blocks of time to do some of the lab work. So on Tuesday afternoons and Thursday morning, our students who are in our high school science courses have large blocks of time so they can do more extensive lab work. It's nothing more frustrating than starting a lab experiment and being we have to put things away because it's the end of our shorter class period. The same with many of the art activities that where you really need some extended time to work on an art project. So we've tried to bring a greater flexibility to the overall schedule so that our times can match more what the instructional needs may be.
Well, it certainly seems to work. I've been in your school many, many times, and I notice that there is the atmosphere, the participation, especially the level of participation of your students, is very, very high. And I guess you attribute those things to the democratic principles, the ability for students are always asking questions, and not only do they ask questions, but I'm amazed at the depth of understanding that students have in your classrooms. Do you consider that part of, your teachers are not intimidated by the fact that students carry on the conversation without the teacher, and by the way, the teacher in most cases does not stand up in front of the classroom in rows. Do you consider that part and parcel of what you teach at the Essential Schools?
Well, again, part of that underlying aspect of what Ted Sizer was talking about in the coalition and some of his initial study there, the 5-year study, was that what ought to be central to the high school students is using their minds well. And if you can't yourself, as a student, be engaged in conversation and wrestling with and actually doing the work, then you're not as likely to use your mind well. If you're simply a more passive participant in a classroom, as a teacher is doing all the instruction, is doing the lecturing, or doing all of the directing of the learning totally, then you tend to be less engaged. You're not as involved in that, and the mind is not as fully engaged. So the critical thinking, the problem solving comes when students are really engaged and challenged to do something. So that in my world religions class, which I teach one course each year, each semester, when we're looking at some of the common themes across a number of the world religions we'll look at. Students are working in small teams to research those and then present their findings to the class. So we might be looking at how women have been viewed across a particular religion, and students will do some research on that in a small group of 3 or 4, and then make a 10-15-minute presentation to the whole class about what they have found in their research. Now, I could give my own little lecturette on that, but again, they become the passive learner in that setting, and we'd rather have them to be the active learners engaging in their own thinking, their own research.
Dave, I don't know too many principals who teach a class. How many classes do you teach?
I teach one each semester, and I think all principals should stay engaged in the classroom to some degree, as much as their time and schedule permit. It's often the highlight of my day, and it keeps me in touch with the kids. And as we work on things like portfolio demonstrations, as we've developed those, I was right in there trying to figure it out along with the staff. So we're all in it together.
Last year you taught, I remember participating in your brain, I don't remember exactly.
Brain research
brain
class,
research.
right? Recent brain research, yeah. And we were looking, using primarily a lot of case studies as a sort of inductive way to work backwards from case studies to see what we could figure out about how the brain may function. And kids enjoyed that. We had some wonderful discussions from reading these many of these different case studies, or looking at videos about different people that had some dysfunction or mental complication that we could then begin to trace out what was going on with some region or more of the brain.
Well, I found that the manner with which you conducted the class it was sort of backwards in terms of the way a traditional classroom might operate, and the students came to conclusions and were just, the level of understanding of how the brain works was just dramatic, absolutely dramatic. I was mesmerized and learned a great deal myself.
It's been an interesting course that I've enjoyed teaching. There's probably one other feature that we haven't mentioned yet, which as time runs out we should probably say a little bit about, which I think helps in the overall climate of the school, and part of what is a key feature that is true in several other small schools, and certainly some of the coalition schools. It's the structure I mentioned just briefly in passing called family group, where every student is in a small group of about 12 to 15 students. They meet twice a week for a full period, and the teacher or staff member, and anyone and all on the staff can be family group leaders. They serve essentially as the advisor for those students, as a kind of teacher counselor. They're the advocate, so that every student, we're trying to make sure that every student is known rather well by at least one staff member, and that's the opportunity that can occur often in these family groups. Family groups often plan and do activities together, whether it's some fundraising, which they do to help contribute to the spring trips, or whether it's planning some social fun event together. There are a number of things, as well as often, particularly the high school family groups. It's a place where students will bring their own personal issues, family issues, struggles with their own learning, their own academic program, and find a supportive environment in which they can find peers and a staff member who will help them with whatever those particular issues might be. So again, it's a way of breaking down that large sense of a school into a smaller family group, as the name implies, where there can be a small sense of family and caring created within the school community.
Dave, I want to thank you for joining us. I know in your hectic schedule how your time is so incredibly valuable, and I want to mention that Dave travels around the country, and I think the world, lecturing about his school and the things that he's learned over the last quarter of a century. Thank you so much for your time, Dave.
We're very glad to be here.
We'd like to thank you for joining us this week on Children Come First. We're here every Tuesday, WAAT 750 AM on your radio dial. This is Dr. Daria Brzezinski. If you'd like to reach us, you can reach us toll-free at 877-PRO-KIDS. That's 877-PRO-KIDS. Or you can email us at prokids@rlc.net. That's PROKIDS, PROKIDS, @rlc.net. If you'd like to speak with Dave Lehman about the Alternative Community School in Ithaca, New York, you can reach him at 607-274-2183. That's 607-274-2183. And join us again next week, where we will have an interesting guest talking to us about children, their families, and anything else related to children. Please do us a favor and give us a call. Let us know how you feel about our subjects that we talk about, or if you have any other suggestions on people you'd like to hear from, or people you'd like us to interview. We'd be happy to hear from you. Again, call us at 877-PRO-KIDS. That's 877-PRO-KIDS. Or email us at prokids@rlc.net. That's PROKIDS, PROKIDS @rlc.net. We look forward to hearing from you next week and joining us again with Children Come First. Have a great week and give your children a hug.